Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk to Ron Carucci, and he is an expert in working with CEOs and creating transformation within organizations, why they fail, why transformations fail, and how to make them work. And so we're going to talk about powering through your transformation journey in your business, whether you're a startup, just getting things going, and you want to make sure you do it right, and you got to get from 3 to 100 employees in a short period of time, or whether or not you have an established organization and you're looking to make some changes. How do you do that? And Ron's going to give you some insight on how to do that. Now, if you're a solo entrepreneur listening to this, this is going to be also very valuable to you because he's going to talk about the different ways that we create transformation within ourselves, within others, and with the teams that we lead. So tune in. It's going to be a fantastic show. So Ron let me give you a little bit of background on Ron. And let me just see here. So Ron is a co-founder and managing partner at Navalent, working with CEOs and executives producing transformational change that want to produce transformational change for their organizations, leaders, and industries. He has a 30-year track record helping some of the world's most influential executives tackle challenges of strategy, organization, and leadership. I've been reading some of his books and materials, and I tell you, he is amazing. He's got some extraordinary skills and experience in this area. So from startups to Fortune 10 companies, turnarounds to new markets, strategies, overhauling leadership and culture, to redesigning for growth. He has worked with more than in 25 countries in 4 continents. And in addition to being a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review and Forbes, Ron has been featured in Fortune, CEO Magazine, Business Insider, MSNBC, Inc., Business Week, pretty much all of them, Smart Business, and certainly talked to thought leaders. So he is an author of 8 books, including his latest book, which is Rising to Power, and which he co-authored with Eric Hansen. So we're really excited to have him here. Welcome, Leaders of Transformation, Ron.
Nicole, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I have to tell you, I was reading your book and I was like, my goodness, like, what am I going to ask? Where do I start? There's so many things that we can talk about here based on your expertise and experience, not just in your research, but the experience that you have, the hands-on experience working with CEOs and creating turnarounds. It's been extraordinary. So let's start off with the problem of trying to create transformation within an organization. You know, listening to, or reading, I should say, some of your articles, it says that 60 to 70% of transformations fail. You know, I'm sure there's good intentions behind that, but why? Why are they failing?
Yeah, it's painful to watch, especially when we get called in to mop one up. It's just the carnage is destructive. I think, so let's start with your assumption about the good intentions. I think there almost always are. There are certainly a set of leaders who really want the appearance of transformation, right? It's about the illusion. It's for the shareholders or the board or some audience they want to make look like change is happening, but really they don't really want to have anything change. That's a small subset of failures. But the vast majority of leaders who set out to have to do some significant amount of change grossly underestimate what it takes. They either define the problem too narrowly, or they define the opportunity too easily, and don't understand how systems work. Right? So they think, if I just pull this lever of structure or technology or culture or whatever their favorite lever is, and I pull it hard enough, things will change. They either and they give up too easily, right? So, or they assumed that announcing change is the same as actually implementing change. You know, so often I hear the lament of executives, I've done 3 videos, 4 town halls, I've sent the memo, what else do they want? I have to break the hard news to them that explaining change, even doing a great job explaining the need for change, isn't the same as actually affecting change by a long shot. And I remember I was working with a very, very large global restaurant company who we all have in our towns. I won't say the name, but they have 2 little golden arches. We had done a massive global organization design work. And the CEO at the time, we had spent months and months and months with his executives rebuilding a very different way around the globe for this restaurant to exist, for which there were no more room on the planet for any more of them, right? So now how do we grow? And after the design was done and unveiled, I said, well, okay, now we have to actually implement it. And you could hear this genuine ache in his voice. And he said to me, wait, there's more?
Wow.
And I said, we haven't started yet. I know you've been thinking about this for a long time. And executives forget that transformation happens in waves, right? So by the time they get to the place where it makes total sense to them, they've conceived it, they see a path forward, they see the benefits, they've reconciled the costs and the disruption, and they're there. Everybody else is just starting that journey. And so the executives get impatient, right? Because now it's clear to them. They forget that they have to turn around to lower level managers and leaders and individual contributors and customers and everybody else who's going to be affected by this thing, who hasn't even given it a thought. And now, part of the cruelty of being a leader is that you get to work through your own junk when it comes to the change, and you get to help everybody else through theirs, and sometimes at the same time. And all of that complexity, so many leaders just don't give it a thought. They don't understand that change takes a lot more to affect and have it stick than they realize. So you get the flash in the pan guys, right? They get a big sizzle up front, some early evidence that things might be different, but they don't understand that systems by their nature will regress back to what's familiar. And they don't bargain for that part. And so then they panic, or they go, this didn't work, what a waste of time. They fire somebody whose idea it was, and just go back to the way things were, or then a year later they try something else. And they don't understand that your organization has a history of change fatigue, right? So every organization, no matter how big or small, has some portion of what we call the "this too shall pass" club, of the people who are, here we go again. And they sort of have a little side pool about how long they're going to wait it out and how long it will last before it goes back, and they just love to wait out the changes because they have seen such a history of failure or giving up or not sticking with it that they just assume this will go next. And what's unfortunate about that is that you have a new leader or a leader who now gets the need for it, or they're backed into a corner and they have no choice, and they have to do the no, but this time we really mean it message. And right, you said that last time. And so now you've got this, and this time you might even have the change right. You might even have it conceived well, but now you've got this massive sea of cynicism and lack of hope and fear into which you're trying to deposit this change. Can't hold it. And the most dangerous, I tell leaders before they begin their journeys, the most dangerous thing you can ask of an organization is hope. Because nobody is in more pain than they are. Nobody recognizes the need for change more than they do. They're surprised it's taken you this long to get it. And if you ask them to hope for change and then dash their hopes when not delivering it, you're never going to get that back. So if you are not absolutely sure you're going to, no matter what it takes, deliver this transformation, no matter how rough, how hard, how bloody it gets, you're not going to stop. If you're not that sure, do not start.
Well, people don't like change by nature, right? I mean, it disrupts things. And even if it's going to be for the better, oftentimes people look at the cost of what it's going to take to create that change, and they don't really want to do it. Then you've got this visionary leader. I mean, a lot of leaders have that, like they're strategic and there's different skills, but vision is one that I think, would you say that a lot of them have? And so they're like, oh, I see it. I see the picture of what we're going to do here. I'm guilty of that. It's like, we're going this way. And what I learned years ago, reading John Maxwell's books, actually, and seeing the impact of poor leadership around me, is that I realized I can't make too many changes too fast, because I can personally for myself make a change and implement it and course correct, no problem. But other people that are impacted by it or following me may not make that change with me. So I take the turn and they keep going straight on the road and go off the cliff, and it doesn't work. And I remember what John Maxwell said. He said, one of his books, something about go fast enough, like that you're leading, but not too fast that you lose people, there's this fine line to that.
And
So,
the bigger your organization, that velocity becomes a very interesting lever, because in some cases you need to stage change and sequence it. And some places you have to go faster, and some places they're not ready, because maybe they're interdependent, right? You can, you can have lots and lots of initiatives underway, lots and lots of projects. Even in a startup, you see all this mayhem and chaos, but at some point they all have to sit together into the same story. And you're right. The only people I've ever seen like change are wet babies. And after that, I've never seen anybody say, "Ooh, I love change." What I have seen is, I'm all for you changing, but I don't want to change.
Ooh, good one.
And so the reality is, but I think if you really dig underneath what it is people dislike about change, it's not the change itself. People change, they buy cars, they buy houses all the time, but they fear change that excludes them, right? So it's when I can't see myself in the story that you're telling, I'm going to panic and I'm going to dig my heels in. And the reality is, I'm going to be vulnerable in that. What is this going to expose? How prepared am I or not for this change, this new story you're telling? And the reality is, even if it's great change, every change is not about a new beginning. Every change starts with an ending, right? And when things end, people grieve. And if you don't start the process by understanding that you're stopping something before you're starting something, and you have to work people through the ending before you can help them have an appreciation for the new beginning. So often when we go into diagnose organizations, we hear in our diagnostic interviews, we've been fighting with supply chain for 20 years and I don't care. You hear these feuds, and you can tell by the data what era of the organization they got stuck in, by what ending they didn't get out of. And so you have organizations that are stuck in these various eras of failed change. And now you're trying to consolidate them and get them into one page of transformation. Well, transformation is never one thing. And the larger your organization, you get from 100 employees to 500 employees to 10,000 employees. Now you have multiple generations of various experiences of change, that some went well, some didn't go well, some are still stuck. And that's all in the story. And for a new leader who has this great vision, they're ignoring that. Right? They're just talking about this new thing, and they forget that context of change that they're trying to get everybody to go on the journey with them. It matters. And if you sound like you don't understand them, or that you're ignoring what's in front of you, you look out of touch. So your vision could be brilliant, but you look delusional, because people think, what is he smoking? What does he know us? And
does he not realize that this, and this has happened, especially if a new leader is coming in from outside?
Or he wasn't even here then, so what does she know?
Yes. And
then they try to corral the he or she new person, go, just so you know, around here, that's not really how it works. And we see so many executives derail. They come in with this mythical mandate, right? And we set these leaders up to fail, right? This is what we learned in our 10-year study. During interviews, we say to people things like, "Wow, look at these great technologies you built. That's what we need here." Or, "My gosh, you built such great sales forces all over the world. We need that." Or, "Wow, you've turned around 3 supply chains before and modernized their manufacturing footprint. That's exactly what we need here." And in those messages, we send a very dangerous signal that says, you have a formula, you have a recipe, and we want you to bring it here. So now you think you got this mandate to go repeat past successes. So you walk in blind to the context, blind because you think they've given me permission to come and slap on my formula. So that's what I'll do. And of course, we've seen this a million times. I'm sure you've seen it a million times too, Nicole. We slap harder, they resist more. We slap harder, then we say things like, "You didn't tell me it was this bad." Or, "Oh my gosh, how have you people made any money around here? How have you survived? I didn't know it was this bad." Now you've turned your diagnosis into an indictment.
Mm-hmm. Now you're insulting them.
And now when they're insulted and indicted, guess what they do? They're not getting on your agenda. They just back away.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the seeds of failure are sown. But they're sown in the process of selecting them. In the process of being so excited about their track record that you thought you're the next one on the notch on the belt. You've now said, and great leaders understand that from a contextual point of view, the organization has as much to change in you as you have to change in it. And if you're not going to allow the context to shape you enough to earn your credibility to shape it, your DOA. Mm.
Yeah. Reminds me of a CEO that I talked to many years ago. I was speaking for them, and he had come into the organization many months before as a CEO, but he hadn't really taken on that role in the sense of like, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? What he ended up doing is he ended up spending those months asking questions, getting into the organization, understanding the culture, understanding where people were at. And that's what led to him being successful, because people actually thought, wow, this guy really cares. He's really interested in what's going on here. And he really wants to make changes here, but changes that improve and enhance, the benefits for everybody. So really, really cool. Now you talk about the 3 domains of transformation. Let's spend some time there. I think that's really insightful when I was reading through your material talking about that.
So, one of the reasons when we diagnose failed change, typically we're going to find that one of these 3 areas didn't get covered. But we can make incremental changes, an improved process, a new skill set, in discrete parts of an organization just fine through incremental means. But for the most part, anything transformational is going to have discontinuity to it, right? It's a systemic look. And so in those cases, change has to happen in these 3 areas at the same time. And our code language for them is within, between, and among. So change has to happen within leaders, right? Deep in their own psyches, in their own narratives, in the stories they tell themselves about how they see the world, and the templates and biases they use to make sense of the world, because all of that is shaping the transformation, right? So if I let those templates and predispositions leak into my organization, I'm going to miss things, and I'm going to make assumptions about things, and I'm going to be triggered by certain events and certain kinds of people that are going to intoxicate the change and make it destructive. So change has to happen at a deeper level within leaders. Change has to happen between. So this is, at the seams of an organization, this is where, great value is really created. It's not any one person, or function that creates value, marketing or sales or innovation or R&D or technology. But it's really at the intersection of those things that great value, great competitive distinction is created. So making sure those seams between, we don't have the classic war between sales and marketing. We don't have the classic cost wars between R&D and manufacturing. The people in a startup who are doing 10 jobs at once are not fighting over resources and the attention of the entrepreneur. But that these intersections between people and between disciplines are actually integrated. That they don't perceive conflicting goals or perceive conflicting incentives, or they don't feel like the priorities are changing every day. And so ensuring that transformation happens between them is equally as important. And then finally, change has to happen among. It has to happen systemically. So your governance structures, how decisions are made, how information is moved, has got to be aligned with what you say you want to do. The strategy's got to be clear. It's astounding to me whenever I ask, especially in the earlier years of an organization, show me your strategy. I get the mission, vision, value statement, or I get the product quota, or I get the financial goals, or I get the business plan they gave the funder to get their Series A money, or I get Costco called, here's the order, that's the strategy. I get some counterfeit to identity. But when I ask people, okay, but tell me who you are. Tell me why people would choose you over competitors. Tell me what you're better at than they are. Tell me what capabilities are you investing $1 in that bring $5 in the door. Tell me what sets you apart and why you have a right to win. No sale, no blank. I get objectives. We will penetrate this market by 20%. Okay, but why will that happen? But they can't get to that. They haven't done the work to do the real strategic definition of who they are. And every decision you make as a leader about your organization's transformation has got to pivot off of that clarity. And when that clarity is not there, you're strafing with silver bullets. You're hoping that one of these sticks. Then I look around and I'm like, okay, well now I have classic initiative proliferation. Someone's over here doing a new technology platform. Someone's over here installing Salesforce. HR is out there creating a new performance management system. The IT department is installing a new web cloud portal for everybody to get data on. Some engineers are creating new processes for how we go to market. Marketing is doing a whole new branding campaign. It's all happening. People don't realize it's all the same company. Same people have to live with all these things, and no one is integrating any of that change because it doesn't ladder up to the same story, because we don't know what that story is. So getting strategic clarity on who you are and who you're not, and until you tell me what you're saying no to, you have no strategy. And getting
Talk about that.
Well, if you're saying, and this is true, especially for entrepreneurs, no is their least favorite word, right? If you're saying yes to everybody, if you're a jack of all trades and master of none, and you think your great thing works for everybody, that's not strategy. That's not clarity. Strategy means saying no. It means to even great ideas, so that your best ideas can prevail. But if you're so afraid that, oh my gosh, this is a major $2 million opportunity, we can't possibly say no. Okay, every yes you deliver is that much more dilution of your resources and focus and commitment to an organization that has no capacity to execute on it. We'll just go hire the people. We will. You hear these, self-convincing statements of really delusion. And so the discipline to pick a swim lane and stay in it and build for the long term, that's what sets great companies and great organizations apart. But too often early on, they're so afraid to narrow that focus because it feels so risky to them. And so once you have that strategic clarity, then your organization, I use the metaphor of mitosis, like babies form inside their mothers. Mitosis starts happening. Specialization of work starts happening. Work starts dividing like cells. And if you're not managing that and deciding how it's going to mitote, it's going to just proliferate. And suddenly you people going from having 5 jobs to 10. And then suddenly you hear the mayhem start to turn to chaos, and people are burning out, and people are leaving and defecting. And but the entrepreneur thinks, wow, look at how intensely people committed are. Look how much fun they're having, and they try and justify that what they're seeing is actually good when it's actually destructive. Mm-hmm. So within, between, and among, any one of them, you could do 2 of them brilliantly and one of them crappy, and you'll derail the whole transformation. And so often when we look at that screen and we go in to see failed transformations, we'll see the one they didn't get right, or the one they didn't even pay attention to, or worse, didn't even know to pay attention to.
So now this is you're talking about a lot of skills that are required of a CEO, and you've got people that are talented, like I was saying, visionaries, or they've got they're very strategic or whatever, but invariably there's going to be something in there that they're not good at, whether it's relating to people, whether it's like the E-myth. Michael Gerber talks about, the entrepreneur, the technician, or the manager. You might be a great entrepreneur or CEO or visionary leader, but are you a good manager? Do you understand people? Are you incorporating that? So how do CEOs develop that, complement of skills that are maybe outside their,
The good news is when you're at the top of the organization, whether anywhere on the executive team, you're not necessarily responsible to have them all yourself.
Right.
You're responsible to see the organization has them somewhere.
Yes.
And so you may not be deeply inclined to get into people's psyches and understand the motivation behind their behaviors, but somebody ought to be, right?
And you got to value it, that it's important. Right. Otherwise, then it creates a block.
Otherwise, and you want to invest in it.
Yeah.
And you have to let it happen to you too.
Mm-hmm.
You may not be the team builder, the one who wants to create cohesion across the organization, or to make sure the decision rights are that precisely distributed so people are not fighting at borders and having border wars. You may not be the big picture thinker that can see systemically how all the pieces fit together, but somebody has to be, right? So the great news is that the capabilities required to do within and between and among have to be somewhere, but they don't have to be within one person. And the minute you think it has to all be you, you're probably going to set the organization up to fail, because it can never all be all you. And so often, as organizations go through mitosis and scale, they forget to scale. They actually just grow and they get bigger, but the entrepreneur can't let go, right? And so they scale themselves to have this bigger than life version, but they don't actually scale the organization and invest in capability at a much faster rate than they invest in cost. And so often they're growing top line revenue, but they're growing bottom line cost at the same rate by just adding and bolting on stuff and renting people and doing temporary Band-Aid fixes, and to the point where there's so many nip and tucks, like that person who's had way too much cosmetic surgery, and they just look like the whole organization looks like that. And it's kind of like you have to just bury your head like passing a car accident, because it's so terrible. And then that's when Your venture capital person layers over you, brings in we're going to bring a professional CEO in now. And they layer over the startup team, and they bring in executives from outside. And it's an unfortunate moment because it's avoidable. But the reality is that, the level of and speed of adaptation that has to happen early on in a company, many people are not ready for.
So now you just described a lot of organizations out there. There's a lot of that going on. So you go in and they call you to help fix this. So how do you, when you can't walk away and ignore it, and you got to do something about it, where do you begin with that?
Well, so like any good surgeon, we say, you need to go to MRI. I'm not going to go into the OR with you until I know exactly what's happening here. So we do a really, really forensic and comprehensive diagnostic of the organization to understand from a systems point of view, from a strategic clarity point of view, from a hardware, governance, structures, processes, work, technology, a software, culture, people, values, norms, skills, aspirations, and look at the hardware and software and understand how is this all fitting together, and is it all being shaped by any sense of strategic clarity or not? And then come back with a really, really comprehensive diagnostic report that we make the leaders make sense of. We do not come in and say, here's what this means. We do eventually. We'll tell you, here's our point of view and how it compares to other organizations and what they've done. But we sit you in a room for a day and a half with that data and look in the mirror to say, this is the story your organization is telling itself about itself and that you helped create. Parts of it are beautiful. Parts of it maybe nauseate you. Parts of it may shock you. Parts of it, how could they possibly think this? Parts of it may not even be true. It doesn't matter. It's the story they're telling themselves, so it's true to them. Before you pick up the pen and write the next chapter of the story, you have to be honest about the story that's being told right now. There is more change in here that's required than you can actually take on right now. So we have to limit the scope of what we're going to go do and order a battle that says, look, it took you this many years to screw it up and get it into this place. There's no silver bullet that's going to get you out of here overnight. So we're talking about a year plus journey here, maybe more, of navigating your way out of this. That's the journey we're going to construct. And it's going to have elements of within, between, and among in it. And it's going to be sequenced and staged at a velocity that your organization can actually tolerate and absorb without choking. And along the way, it's going to transform you into the leaders you need to be to lead them. Because let's be clear, by virtue of the fact that the data says this, you're not that. Because if you were, we wouldn't be looking at this data. So now we have to form you into those leaders that can become the leaders needed to lead this journey.
Sorry, I was on mute there. I was going to say that's a tough pill to swallow for somebody who's got, perhaps an ego and is saying, no, I've been working at this for X number of years, and you come in and tell me. So it's tough.
Most executives are actually relieved, Nicole. They're not. Sometimes people bristle because it's hard and they have to vent and get defensive because they believe they had done everything they needed to do to avoid the ditch that they find themselves in or the stall point they find themselves at. It's classic. We see it. It's the $50 million company trapped in the body of a $10 million organization, right? It's $200 million company trapped in the body of a $30 million organization. They grew but didn't scale. It's like the teenage boy in his dad's suit, right? Yeah. And so it's normal. It's not like, shame on you for thinking you did have all the skills to avoid this. Why would you think that? And so it's a little bit arrogant to assume that, right? So the ability to be humble about and let your people see you, the greatest source of credibility you have is letting your people see you be formed. Because otherwise...
Talk about that because you mentioned it in one of your articles that I think it was actually the ebook that I read, where you talked about trying to create creating the transformation within without telling anybody about it and the impact of that. I found that fascinating.
Well, what a wasted asset, right?
Yeah.
People want to know you're not perfect. Right? So many leaders spend so much time hiding from their imperfections, and thinking that you've trained the organization to think you're the answer ATM, and that's you think that's a safe place, looking smart and buttoned up. That's actually the most dangerous place you can be because nobody believes it. Your vulnerability, your imperfections, your humanity, the exposure of those things is actually one of the safest places you can be, is out in the open, because that's when people will rally around and support you. That's when people will come and join your agenda. You have a counterintuitive narrative that says if they knew, they wouldn't. But the truth is, they think you don't know, and therefore they can't. And the reality is, once they know you know, they're like, oh, cool. I can live with that. They can live with your imperfections. They can't live with you ignoring them. So letting people be part of that journey and help shape you earns you your right to ask them the same thing. Now let me be part of yours. Let me earn my right to shape your future. Let me earn my right to shape your leadership, your experience here, the places you need to grow. And they'll trust you more if they think that you've gone there first. And that's the reality of being a leader, is that your job is to go first.
Yeah, that's great. Now, in your Rising to Power book, you talk about CEOs to this point. Actually, it follows with what we were just talking about, is you've got right now, there's a leadership gap, right? So you've got these leaders transitioning out that have been at the helm for however many years. They leave, something happens, or they leave and retire. And now you've got this new generation, and there's a lot more movement in this space where young people are becoming CEOs of companies and not having these skill sets. So how do you help them to accelerate that process and bridge the gap? Because they're there, right? Or they're planning to make that leap. And how do they do it? Because they're eager. Oh my gosh. I mean, the millennials, man, they are, I mean, put me in, I'm ready, and they may not be, but they're talented, and they've got the passion for it.
And they have to recognize that they're not ready. It's okay. And it's okay not to be ready. But yeah, I just had a call this morning with an organization that's using Rising to Power in their new executive onboarding program. They've changed the way they actually select executives from within for C-suite roles, and it's a very big, high-risk organization with a lot of very highly technical, specialized people who deal with a lot of trade-offs that have massive implications for public safety and life and death situations. And I said, you want me to come in and speak for an hour and put very powerful leadership tools into their hands and hope that it goes well? Because I'm not playing. I'll come in and I will help them prepare for these roles that you have appointed them to, because you think you've done a better job of selecting them, and maybe you have. But I'm not going to be irresponsible and go in and say, here's how you understand the seams of your organization. Good luck with that. Or here's how you make a really hard trade-off between two equally difficult decisions. Hope that goes well for you. Hope nobody dies. So helping them understand that people don't just mature because you tell them to. So the reality is that was one of the best parts of the research, was that we were able to identify not just the things that cause the 50% of those leaders to fail on the way up. That was painful enough to discover, is why there are so many landmines in the way of leaders, people we call high potential, people we call, skip level ready, and all these terms we give them. And then suddenly they're a disaster. Suddenly, how could you have misjudged their potential so much? Well, no, you just set them up to fail. But the 50% that were sticking the landing, the half that were actually succeeding in these bigger jobs, once there, we were able to isolate the capabilities that actually recurrently set them apart and help them to be successful. That was exciting. And the great news was, while the data said you had to be good at all four of them or you failed, that was a little daunting. The great news was you can learn them, right? So you can actually build these capabilities and these muscles in these leaders well in advance of them actually having to assume broader roles, so that when they get there, they're ready.
So it's not waiting. So what you're saying is it's not waiting. It's, I forget the stats on middle managers, the amount of training, you probably know this, the amount of training they get per years that they're actually, like when they are promoted to middle manager, how much training they actually get to support them in the job. And then of course on an ongoing basis, it's minuscule in terms of that. Yeah.
69% of the people that we in our research study, was more than 2,700 leaders, said that they had minimal and ongoing support once they got bigger jobs. and that they couldn't let go of the job they left. So they gave us really painful looks at how much their organization didn't do to prepare them for the job they were given, and how they were kind of left on their own.
So it's the vote of confidence and saying, wow, you're so awesome. We believe in you. And yeah, go to it and good luck with that. Like you were saying.
If you have any questions, call.
Yeah, let us know. And they're feeling like, wow, this feels good. And at the same time, it is such a huge waste of human confidence, human capital to do that, because talented people then develop this. If you have a massive failure like that, and especially the higher up, the bigger the failure, more visible, then how do they recover from that? It could be a career destroyer for them. So,
yeah. And it's cruel. It really is cruel of organizations to do it to people. And you see leaders, so many of them suffering with the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Suffering with I'm going to get found out here.
Yeah.
I'm going to know that I'm not qualified for the job. And our first message is, relax. They all know you're not qualified. Don't worry about it. They get it. And now you can, stop wasting time trying to convince them you are qualified and just lean to the areas you're not.
That's great.
But spending time trying to perpetuate the illusion of you got this all buttoned up is exhausting everybody.
Yeah.
So often we focus on the interpersonal things, right? So they're gruff, or they're impatient, or they're indecisive, or we come up with these little idiosyncratic manifestations of these things, and sometimes we're looking at much deeper pathologies than that, and we have people in the coaching world who aren't qualified to deal with that stuff, or we give them generic stuff. We give them the 6 habits, the 5 skills, the 4 whatever, the silly things that we think are going to be techniques, without any contextualization, and so then we set them up to fail even more, because now they're like, okay, well, you give me the recipe, but and now we don't tell them how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually another thing that I got from the material I went through. It's very interesting, because you can do the right things. It's like you can have the positive affirmations, you can develop those habits, but if you haven't, like you talked about the pathology, and I love how deep you go into this, right? Well, of course you need to get to the change and the transformation that you're looking for, but to actually look at the history and look at where does this come from? It's kind of like I've had clients who, that little voice in their head, they're actually not trying to transform that little voice. They're trying to outrun it. Right? Like, la, 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 can't hear you. Oh, I'm positive. I love myself. I can do this. I can do this. Well, behind the scenes, their subconscious is saying, hell no, let me give you all the reasons why. And so I love that you go deep on this. It's not just strategy. There's oftentimes this disconnect. You have the coaches and the consultants that work on the mindset and all that, or work on strategy. What I love is that you bring it together, and that's always the way I've done it because it's like you can't separate those two.
Separate these things.
Just doesn't work. You don't get the results when you do that.
Amen.
So I love that.
I love that metaphor of trying to outrun it. That's so well said, Nicole. And what people don't understand is that when you get higher up, it runs faster.
Yeah.
So if you're moody, as a middle manager, you're going to create a big dark cloud when you're a senior. If you're overly results oriented as a middle manager, you're going to have a wake of bodies behind you as a senior manager.
Yeah.
These pathologies don't get better with age. It's not like wine. I had a conversation with a company a few months ago, and the opening line was they want to work for an individual executive. And they said, just so you know, you'd be the 4th coach. I said, okay. Is there a reason why we haven't fired him? Well, he's promising engineers. He's the most talented. He's responsible for our most profitable patents in the last 20 years. We just can't afford to get rid of him. We want to give him another shot. I'm like, okay, I'll talk to him. I don't have a lot. These don't usually go well. So 4 times is not a charm, but let me dig around. I'm game. So I said, but before I talk to him, I like to talk to a couple of people that have worked with him before, his HR support person. I want to hear what people are stories. And the stories were very consistent. Gruff, interpersonally, not skilled, a little bit demeaning. But with one particular direct report, he was unusually cruel, like just publicly demeaning, lambasting him. It was horrible treatment. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm trying to be anthropological about this. That could be, he hailed from Latin America, so maybe there's some cultural. He's been here, decades, but maybe there's some cultural dissonance he hasn't resolved yet, or it's not uncommon for very technical leaders to struggle leading other technical leaders. Seen that before, and maybe he's just a jerk that needs to go. So, I'm just puzzled why 3 other, I don't know, I have no idea who they were, but coaches, and we never tell people I don't ever use the word coach to refer to my work. We're just consultants. But anyway, so I got into a meeting with him, and I'm expecting an idiot. I'm expecting somebody who's going to be offensive and sort of trigger me. He was delightful. He was enjoyable. He was smart. Somewhat self-aware. I mean, you could tell that he had some outages about understanding how bad the impact had been on his behavior. And so I asked him, I said, well, so give me a sense for, like, why are you so harsh with people? Is there a reason? Do you feel like it's sort of this results you need to get? Is that what you believe your job as a leader to be? And particularly with this one engineer, why are you particularly so harsh with him? And he's like, I don't know. I mean, he wasn't like trying to hide something from me. He really didn't have an understanding. I said, well, typically in my experience, when there's one person that's been singled out so consistently, that's a trigger, right? There's something in your story, in your narrative, you're repeating here. So is there somebody in your life that he sort of reminds you of, or is there some phantom images in your mind when you're talking to him, and he thought it was an odd question, like he hadn't given it a thought. And then in a minute, his eyes bugged open, and you could see him getting emotional. And he said, "Oh my gosh, he's just like my big brother." I said, "Tell me more." He said, and then I heard the story. His big brother was the golden child in the family. He grew up in a very results-oriented family in Latin America, excessively achievement-oriented. Nothing he did was ever good enough. I mean, a pretty classic textbook story of transference here. And so this was his older brother he had to beat up on. And so we began, okay, now I got something to work with here. And I left thinking, that was fascinating to discover that. But what was troubling to me was, why did it take 4 coaches?
That's what I was thinking.
This is not like deep therapy work. I mean, I said, I only agreed to work with him. I said, you need to see a therapist.
It's patterns.
But you have, that transference is a trigger you need to go deal with. I'll deal with your leadership work and the manifestations of that behavior here, but that's work you need to go do with the therapist. And if you'll see a therapist, then I'll work with you. If you want me to see a therapist, then I'm not going to work with you. And now we're working together. But honest to goodness, it had been multiple years of money and effort, and piles of 360 instruments and personality tests and whatnot. And here's this data. Here's this golden nugget of important information about this man's story that can help us understand a behavior that you say you want to correct. You think he's not getting it. You think he's not I'm already hearing that. I just think he's not a fit.
Yeah.
We've all heard that label before. And no one's ever asked for the story. And just so, and it's so common. It's so common that people in the helping profession, in the, whether they're coaching people to how to organize their closets better, or how to be more productive, or how to be a better social media marketer, or how to be a better leader, whatever the nature of the helping advice is, they're so ill-equipped to understand fundamental behavioral sciences behind changing behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Oh my gosh. That's a whole topic in itself, but we won't get into it today. But yes, thank you so much, Ron. This has been great. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about here. Now, you have a free ebook, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes on leading transformation. It's one of the documents that I went through, and really fantastic, eye-opening, talking about the 3 domains and all the different elements. And then, of course, you have your book, Rising to Power. We'll make sure that's in the notes as well. A link to that. Of course, people can find it on Amazon. And your website. Let's give them your website. So if people want to reach out more to you, it's Navalent.com. We'll make sure that's in the notes as well. So for our leaders out there, oh my gosh, you've given them such a rich toolbox of things to consider, where do they start?
Gosh, I'd say start with you. Make sure you're tuned up the way you need to be tuned up. Make sure that you don't have any dark clouds getting in the way of what you're trying to get done. And if you have never been calibrated, one of the sad things is when I get with a leader who has never gotten feedback. I just with a president of a very fast-growing brand, his career had moved along way too fast, and good guy, but had never been calibrated before. And I'm actually going to meet with him very soon to give him his first 360 report of qualitative research on him. And none of any of it will come as a shock, but no one ever told him before. And so if you have been uncalibrated, if do not leave your understanding of how people experience you to chance, and don't assume don't assume no news is good news, and don't assume they're going to come bouncing into your office telling you, here's the thing you suck at. They're not. So if you have never received some type of calibration about how others are metabolizing what you're doing, get it yesterday. And then secondly, if you're leading and shaping the identity of a community of some kind for its future, be very clear on your identity. Make sure you've answered the questions of what are the things that set you apart competitively from others. Why are you very clear on who should choose you and why they should choose you over somebody else and who that somebody else is? And where are you making investments and capabilities to deliver on that differentiation? Be very specific and clear in that. And don't make any other decisions to invest in your organization until you're clear on that. And then prioritize every other decision you do make based on those. And it sounds so much easier than it really is. But gosh, if you'll do that, you'll give the people that you lead a great gift.
Ron, thank you so much. I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm like, amen. That's the mission, the focus, this specific piece, what you're just talking about, determines is the North Star for all the other decisions. And I so agree with that. So
don't waste time writing mission statements. Don't waste time writing a vision statement. Don't do it. Just get clear on who you are.
Yes. I love that. Awesome. Thank you, Ron, so very much. I appreciate you. And we really, as I said, there's so much here. I encourage our listeners, go get a copy of his book, Rising to Power, that he co-authored with Eric Hansen, and get a copy of the free ebook on leading transformation. I think it's like 48 pages, very in-depth, specifically giving you, the tools and insights you need to be able to start creating transformation within yourself, among your organization, between others. And so I highly encourage you to do that. As a leader of transformation, I'm a big believer in taking action. Certainly, there's a lot of ideas, a lot of things that we've shared here today. Take something. That's where at the end I asked Ron, where do we start with this? Start looking at yourself, get feedback, get calibrated, and get clear on who you are. And take action today on that, because all of this information is useless unless you apply it. It's just good head knowledge, and it's got to shift from head knowledge to heart knowledge to actually get down to your feet and, and hands and actually get dirty with it and take action on it. That's where transformation happens. So I encourage you that today. And we thank you for being here. Go to leadersoftransformation.com and you can have the show notes will be there. And if you're looking for that, if you're on leadersoftransformation.com, you can just put in Ron Carucci or Ron, and his will come up right away. So it's easy to find his episode. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon. Have a great day.